Welcome to Alignment. My name is Dasha Kelly Hamilton, and I am the State Poet Laureate. And Alignment is an opportunity for us to fall into authentic conversation with neighbors across the state who may or may not know one another, and will be joined in conversation with one single line of poetry. And the line of poetry is the gospel and soul in this time of fire. What does that mean? And we'll talk about where the poem comes from and the poet who wrote the full poem, but we'll get to that at the end of the show. Right now, I have two incredible guests, and I'm excited to find out the things that they have in common, and of course, celebrate the stories that are going to be so completely different, if for no other reason, by virtue of the fact of their very unique lives. And so my first guest coming to this stage, please welcome Dr. Adanna Johnson. Get her up here. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me, Dasha. It's wonderful to see you. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. So it's one of these moments where we're able to blend sort of the virtual and the real. And I was sharing before we came on the screen, I've been able to admire your work largely through social media. And we have those networks where we have people in common, but this is the first time that we've been able to really sit. So I'm excited to hear your whole story. So I want people to be as fascinated by you and your amazing hair as much as I've been able to watch just the things that are important to you. So I'm excited to learn a bit more. So tell the good people who you are, where are you from, and where you are now.
Thank you. I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I live currently in Tacoma Park, Maryland, which is a suburb right outside of Washington, D.C. We're about 5 minutes from the state line. And I grew up in Milwaukee. My parents lived in Ohio and Wisconsin, respectively. My mother was living in Ohio when she met my dad, and she moved to Wisconsin, and they got married, and that's how I ended up in Wisconsin. I'm currently working at Georgetown University. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Student Equity and Inclusion. But my most important work is as a Black woman, as a community engager and organizer. I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a mother of a 7-year-old. And since the time of Corona, I've been teaching first grade.
So you joined the new legion of parent teachers.
Yes, and I think this is Teacher Appreciation Week, so just hats off to all of the teachers. I love y'all. I never took teachers for granted before, but I have a special love for them now.
What do you think came into focus for you?
As it relates to parenting, or?
Those are two different things. So we're going to do both. So you're saying you have a different appreciation for teachers. What do you think came into focus of that appreciation having?
It takes an incredible amount of patience. I was a psychology professor for 12 years before becoming an administrator. And there's a certain level of patience that's required in college, but you get to do a lot of professing, right? They call it being a professor. You engage, and you get to have these wonderful dialogues with students and critical questions. When you're teaching foundational skills, it requires a lot more patience and attention and time.
I would imagine you learn that there are different strands and varieties of patience. The patience you thought you had, you need the other patience. No. You got the patience from this main shelf. You need the patience from up here.
Right. I need the deluxe patience, not like the store brand. I need luxury patience.
And what's interesting, especially, I'm hearing you speak, and not that there weren't times of, and especially with 7, the energy is high, attention is low, just the age that the son, right?
Yes.
Just the age that he is. but when you talk about the skill levels, you were able to go in when your jam is being able, like you said, be in discussion and critical thought and inviting you to imagine other perspectives. Here, I compared you when I played volleyball all through into college, and so I had a little narrow window where I coached. And if I'm teaching you basics of how to bump, how to set, different from how to strategize and where to hit the ball, it becomes, I realized, it was less a conversation of patience and more of where my skill set is and what invigorates me as an educator and a coach, instructor, mentor, that whole folder. So what did you learn about you, in that same line of thinking?
Yeah, I think it just illuminated a lot of the things that I already knew about myself. It just made them made those things more pronounced, and that I really do enjoy dialogue and appreciate asking tough questions and having that sort of back and forth. And I'm really fortunate in that my son actually really likes that as well. Ayende, although he's 7, is a critical thinker. And so it made me think more, like you're saying, about that continuum, right? It's different types of skills, and that the patience piece is, um, being able to breathe through and allow space for knowing what's needed in different times. And he doesn't enjoy reading as much as he enjoys mathematics, and so it takes a different kind of energy when it comes to reading and writing. Math, he could just do all day. So just learning that about him, learning that about myself, how we're kind of opposites in that regard, because I'm not a huge math person. Like, I was good at math growing up in school, but it was not my preference. I was more of a reader and a writer. So we're like this yin and yang, he and I.
Very nice.
It's been tough, but it's been wonderful in so many ways.
Will he go back into the building in the fall, or they're not having he's not back in the buildings yet?
No, he's still at home.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
He's still at home, but hopefully in the fall he'll return to probably like hybrid.
It's going to be a freedom summer for so many families in a wonderful and frightening way.
Yeah,
in a wonderful and frightening way. Oh my goodness. So tell me a bit about and I definitely appreciate it as your most important job, especially raising a man child, right? So if you think about those balances, he's math, you're English and write and reading, and female, male, all the things that you're learning, because just nothing else, he exists in a whole different polar opposite of you. And and I don't know if having the psychology background is a help or a misguidance sometimes, but how, what have you, I always love to ask parents, especially when they get to this age, because they know so much.
Yeah.
And you have to acknowledge all that they know, but you learn so much about you. So what has surprised you most about being a mama?
Wow. I remember when he was in utero, I would pray over my belly and ask for all of these things for him to be a good person, to be kind, to love music, to love his people, to love his people as in Black people and his family, know. And so I tell him all the time that he is all the things that I prayed for and then some. And one of the things that I didn't anticipate was how much he would teach me. I learned so much from him. And when the pandemic started and everybody was like on super tight lockdown, we would sit down and have lunch together every day. And even before then, I would talk to him about the work that I do. But then he got to see it, because I'd be in the room in the house doing a Zoom call, and he would get to hear me doing workshops or presentations, running meetings, running a department. And so I've talked to him about the challenges that I face, and he's given me advice, really sound advice, that I take to heart and I put into practice, and he's validating. We talk about racism. We talk about other forms of bias. We talk about what I observe and what I have to work through.
Sure.
And we talk about my own experiences as being Black and being a woman, and the ways that microaggressions or bias, racism is enacted toward me. And he validates it. He gives me advice. He's a smart guy.
He's a smart guy. He's got good genes too.
If you need
Honey, what do you think I should? But that does so much, though. It does so much. Just being entrusted with your trust, and being invited to lean into and giving someone else advice, especially a grown up. I'm already celebrating his partners moving forward, and their parents are thanking you now in advance because there's going to be a different awareness that it'll have just interacting with other humans. So I'm curious. So tell me where this line of poetry took you.
Oh my gosh. Immediately, it was the fire. Because I am in the midst of so much fire in the work that I'm doing, with the socio-political context being what it is and has been in our country for as long as we can remember the inception of our country. And so I feel a lot of fire. I feel it coming from multiple directions, from the young people that I work with to my colleagues to out in the community. And so it just made me think about how the soul, our being, our breath, right? The core of who we are, from my perspective, how that is our compass. And it's how we navigate the fire that we experience in life. And so we have to be attentive to our character, our spirit, if we're in alignment with our purpose, our convictions, to navigate all this fire that is around us.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about, I was listening to a program, and the young woman, bless her heart, was talking about an incident she was in, and backtracking was, I wasn't even in control of my body. And she was describing this being the space of not so much blackout angry, but just outside of herself. And I think all of us, you go through that space of you get in control of your body, you get in control of your attitude, but you're talking about that soul part and that being a way to navigate. And sometimes you don't know that that's what you're trying to get a grip on. So you try to navigate with your intellect, you try to navigate with your mouth, you try to navigate, with things outside of you. And because soul feels so, sometimes it can feel like a word, right? That is important, but how to tap into it and let it guide you, especially when fire happens. Like, you need to know. They give you the fire drill, so you're not trying to figure out how to get out of the fire when the fire happens. So that idea of of having a healthy soul as a way to navigate when fire happens. How do we get them those soul instructions before the fire happens?
Oh dear. Well, the fire helps you to know, I think, what feels good and what doesn't, and what is like, with no fire, there's no test, right? There's no, well, wait, where's my compass, right? So if we're not being tested, if we're not having challenges, then we may not know. And it is an opportunity to grow when there's something to figure out, something to navigate. There's so much that you learn about yourself. I think that's personally, professionally, and it's throughout life. It's not finite unless you cut yourself off from it.
True.
Life happens. There's always something, and things that we anticipate and things we don't. Like, this whole pandemic has been a disruption for our lives. We didn't, well, public health researchers anticipated this, right? But the rest of us, we weren't tuned into, this is a 5-year window where a pandemic could break out. We weren't thinking.
And when things happen, not pandemic level, happen once in a generation, but to your point, things happen. And are we preparing? Are we giving ourselves the tools to experience life, including the things that are uncomfortable? Or are we trying to shape a life that will not have any discomfort? And I'm hearing you talk of that distinction is that distinction is going to make the fire hotter. And it's reminding just you didn't do anything wrong because something happened. That's part of the life contract. And we do get that confused, don't we?
We do.
We do. I'm going to ask you to have a seat in our fancy green room, and I'm going to have you come back at the end and want to continue this conversation, and we're going to blend it with what our next guests have to talk about. So I think at the end of this, we may have humanity soda. We may have the answer. So thank you so much. I'm going to bring you back up in a moment. So our next guest who's coming to the screen is Miss Thao. So we're excited to hear what she has to share with us. Hello. Thank you for making it here today.
Oh, well, thank you, Dasha. It's such an honor. And I still continue to be starstruck by you, Dasha. Such an honor.
You make me blush. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from and where are you now?
Well, Dasha, where am I from? So I was born in Merced, California, a small town in north central part of California. And I was actually the first in my family, my refugee family, to have been born here in this country. Then I was raised here in the Midwest in St. Paul, Minnesota. Then I tell folks I married into Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I've been here in Milwaukee for 14 years. Have really, really learned to love and embrace Milwaukee, although that was not necessarily the case when I first moved here. Milwaukee just was very strange because of just the nuances of Milwaukee and very hard to break into community here. But, several years later of being fully married into Milwaukee, it's the amazing people who keep me here in Milwaukee. I am a sister, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a community convener, advocate, and then I guess my day job is as Assistant Deputy Director for WIDA, which is the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. But I think the core of who I am, Dasha, is really just a love for community and doing what's right for our communities.
And thank you for that, because the communities need love too.
Right.
With an intention. So love happens because humans are in it, but it's kind of like the one person who is always taking care of the pet, making sure it gets his belly rubbed and making sure it gets outside. I mean, the rest of the family's going to make sure the animal eats, but there's someone who really loves that pet in a special way. So you mentioned about marrying into Milwaukee. And my husband tells that story too. But that language by itself, you're marrying into everything you said, a relationship, previous networks of who went to high school together. And Milwaukee is very, can be linked that way, can be typed that way.
Yes.
But it's also, as a married person, you can appreciate the same parallel of an in-law navigating in-laws. So what is your strategy for other folks who are marrying into the city that is very strange, that has all the things?
Yeah.
How do you marry into a city?
And Dasha, what a great comparison. It is kind of like that in-law dynamics, right? It's like you're in, but you're not quite in. I think for me, the strategy was just identifying key people that I would meet through my professional work or just, out and about in the community, and just seeing folks who I just thought, oh my gosh, that's a woman I would love to get to know better. That's a woman who I would love to grow up to be like, and then just finding the opportunities to meet with them and get to know them and start building relationship. That's at least how I was able to start building community here, was just amazing folks who I saw from a distance. And I was like, I need to know her. Mm-hmm. And I'm just very connected to authentic, genuine people who also love community. And so that's kind of those are the folks I start putting on my radar, like, ooh, that person.
You don't know it yet, but we're about to be best
That,
friends.
I have so many girlfriends now who say that I stalked them, but it truly is. It's very intentionally. It's like looking for your significant other. You have to be that intentional.
Who do you, and I know there's not going to be a particular profile, right? So what are the ingredients of what you, of the souls you are trying to curate around you?
Oh, that's just the true, the power that emanates from folks and the power of speaking their truth. That's what draws me in, because I always feel like I'm going through this evolution of myself, right? And finding my voice and finding the right voice during the right periods of my life. And for me, it's seeing that those individuals who speak their truth so powerfully and who stand in their power, that's who I look for.
And I would hope with some grace that it's a process, right? Because I have those same moments like, oh my goodness, what did she just do that to this whole room, or did she just make this space? Like you said, did she just say that thing so powerfully? And when I wasn't in a position, or you don't have that platform, or you're not really clear about, to have that aspirational model right in front of you, right in your, whether you know them or not, you can observe this kind of mentorship. I love that as a purposeful way to immerse yourself in a space.
Right.
And the way that you've moved, I'm an Army brum, so we've been the new kid a lot. So you get strategies that get you through. Yeah. Have you always been, or that's not fair. Tell me about your journey as a community person. Is this new work, or has this always been your work?
It's always been my work, I think, Dasha, because I was always, my family members tell me that even as a young girl, even as a toddler, I just was always very compassionate and very sensitive to others. And so I think that's just, again, the core of who I am. And then, of course, growing up in a family who was very community oriented and always providing leadership and community volunteerism. So growing up that way, I think just being surrounded by people who had the same heart. And then, I think that influences who you look for in your own networks. And so I would very intentionally look for mentors as well. Again, back to the stalking people, I would see amazing women and I would say, oh my gosh, I would love to have her mentor me. And I would just reach out, cold call them and say, hey, I saw you, I met you at this meeting, but it really is just having grown up in that space of love for everyone and compassion for everyone. And then very intentionally growing that within myself. And now, kind of influencing my children to understand that it's about love for each other.
But I love me too. I can prioritize myself too, though, right? How do I do that? And especially as a community person.
Yes. It is so hard, and I just had this conversation actually with a friend the other day that sometimes for me personally, Dasha, I give of myself so much to others and I forget about myself. And so the last couple of years, to be quite honest, have really been about how do I turn inwards now and work on myself and carve out that space to take care of me so that I can take care of my family. Because when you do community work, right, it's oftentimes your own family that gets left behind. And that's been a really hard learning lesson for me.
How your children, teens, grown, munchkins?
Oh, my daughter just became a teenager, so 13. And then my little guy, who's no longer little, is 11. I also have a stepson who's 27. So that's really helpful to have my stepson so that I can learn from those years of growing up with him as a mom.
I see. You can refer to your notes. Okay, wait a minute. 12 meant. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's a whole thing. I remember because my daughter she turns 21 this summer. and I have three bonus babies, my stepchildren as well. So they're entering, so they're 12, 13, and 14, 15. So same thing. I'm like, okay, how did that go? What were they mad about at 11? What were they excited about at 12? So, and then the rules change. So whatever notes you had for them, remember, parents, these are completely different individuals. We forget that part because we need a way to get to it. But then getting to it, I would love to hear, where did this poetry line take you? What stories did it bring up for you?
Dasha, it was powerful. The poetry line brings me to where we're at right now, right? This journey of our nation, and very similar to Adanna, it brought me to the soul being who we are, our souls, our spirits, the core of who we are, knowing right from wrong. We all know right from wrong. We all know when we need to speak up, when we need to stand up, especially during turbulent times, during chaotic times. But the fire also, to me, represents the passion that so many of us have, that's in our bellies, right? The fire in our bellies that keep us moving forward and keep us charging forward. But it is truly our soul that is that compass, that North Star for us, because that is where truth and light stem from.
And similar question that I share with Adanna, if we have it, do we all know that we have it? So was it so that's the question. So we have this North Star, we have this source, we have this power and light, all the words. But that's what you need to access in a time of fire. So what have you found to be? Is it that people? What do you find to be with that? Is where we're not grasping that? The question is, we all have it, then we should be done. We should be together.
Right.
So what do you think is the conversation or the trick or what?
I think what it comes down to, Dasha, I think is fear, right? We all know right from wrong. We have that innate wisdom in our souls, but there's a fear of trusting it, whether it's because we just, in this day and age we live in, everything is so distracting. Social media and all these, other platforms distracting us from just that quiet stillness to hear our own voices. I think that's one of the things, is that fear of just listening to our own innate wisdom. And then there's also other fears that come into play, right? Fears of perception of losing power, having to share power with others who you may not have had to share power with before. All sorts of fears.
And that fear attached to power often means it was an imagined power in the first place.
Yes, exactly.
So I had a colleague reference, and I love this as a distinction, big P and little p, the big power and small power. And it helps people to, it helps keep the conversation out of specifics, like I can't be privileged because I got fired from a job once. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. I'm going to ask Adanna to come on screen, because I think we're on the same thread here, where we all have the answer. You two have laid it out. We know it. It's in there. We've got soul. We know right from wrong, but fear is keeping us from accessing all the things. So in like 30 seconds, let's fix it. What do we do? So we have a community engagement professional. We have a mental wellness professional. That's where it is, in the heart and the minds of the people. Lay it out, ladies. Lay it out. How do we do it?
30 seconds. Dasha, no pressure.
But you both have hit on this willfulness, a willingness and a willfulness, and where they work and where they don't. So if either of you can speak a little bit more about what you heard.
I think for me, it's like, just be brave and just have that courage. Even if that means you have to do your own internal work first, be brave enough to try to overcome that fear. That's the start. I think it starts each of us individually. That's my quick 30 seconds for now.
Agreed. Do you think people, I don't know, do you think people identify or recognize that it's fear?
Well, it could be a lot of things. Fear is attached to, myriad emotions. And for some of us, it's different, right? Sometimes it's fear rooted in guilt. It's fear rooted in shame. It's fear rooted in trauma. And so I think that self-work to understand where our individual responses to the world that maybe don't always serve our ultimate purpose well and disrupt our ability to connect to ourselves. I think that's part of what I've learned from my son, because children are so close to that until we in the world, detach them from it. And that knowing, like you were talking about, knowing the right from wrong, but just really knowing who we are and walking in that. And it's the world that tells you, oh, wait, you shouldn't stand that way, or you're too loud, or, you should do this because you're good at X, right? It's the shaping from the outside world that makes us question that internal compass. And so it is challenge, it is stillness, it is quiet, it is a range of things that I think help us to go back and dig within. What is my own consciousness? So if the soul is immortal, right? What is my purpose during this iteration in this life? And we know that fear, anxiety, those kinds of things can make us think about, wait, what is that purpose? But if we're not attending to the fact that that is to alert us to our purpose, we miss the lesson and opportunity to grow.
I heard that what struck me is the part about, if you think that this lesson is the end, then you're going to miss the gift, the lesson that's coming. So, and so many pieces, so many steps in how we show up in these days are trying to make paths shorter, trying to get to the end faster. And there are lessons that'll get you there. I really love that. Almost what you were saying about life is going to be difficult. And that's part of what's going to get you to the next step. What about you, Minda? What's something that comes to mind for you?
Everything, Adanna, you said, just resonates with me. And it's also about, having to go through the fires to build that resiliency, right? It's that muscle that needs to continue to you need to keep working that muscle to grow. And the resiliency comes with that. But if you can't overcome those fears, again, to Adanna's point, whether it's rooted in trauma or, perceived loss of power, whatever that fear is, I don't think that you are living to your soul, your life's purpose, that the higher being, whoever you believe in, that the higher being created you to be. And that's, what a sad way to live, to not be able to tap into the whole of who you are.
Yeah. And so much and starting with that as a beginning, that this life experience is making everything out of this life experience. I think a lot of people are invited to, this is your starter kit, now make you and your life better, which suggests you're changing. It's not about celebrating what you have, but swapping out what you have. So just that mindset that both of you have laid out is about celebrating and navigating what you have into an evolution, which is different from better, I think. And I could have you on both on the screen all day long, talking about how we're going to make the world better, celebrating the journey that humans take. And I too have stalked you both. So I take the same page, and I'm so grateful that you both made time to share your thoughts, your experiences. And please know, I'm going to be calling again. So this was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. You're lovely and you are fierce. And I'm really glad that these faces are on the screen together, and that these narratives will get to talk more. Have anything that you want to share? Any announcements before we let you go?
So I can start real quick. Just happy Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. This is AAPI Heritage Month. And a quick shout out for those who are in the Milwaukee. Well, social media these days crosses all geographic boundaries, but please follow Elevation. It's a group that I co-founded here in Milwaukee, as well as our AAPI Coalition in Wisconsin. We have a number of different events lined up just to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Johnson, anything you want to share with the good people?
That's wonderful. Mine's Dasha. It's been great to be with you. You said good news. I'm really proud that I have been named as Marquette University's Alumna of the Year in the School of Education. And I had that recorded the award ceremony in the time of COVID last week, but that will be released on May 25th.
Congratulations. Congratulations. See, we head out, but we stay close to home. We head out to the world and we stay close to home. Oh, wonderful. Thank you both for sharing that. Congratulations. And we will definitely talk soon again. We have this conversation about this line of poetry. So the line of fire. And I want to share with everyone where this line comes from. And my favorite part about this series, every first Wednesday we get together and I invite two Wisconsinites to follow in the conversation. They may or may not know each other, and they definitely don't know where this poem comes from. They just have this random line of text. And this month it was the gospel of soul in a time of fire. And this line actually comes from a poem by Jamila Woods, and it is called Ode to Herb Kent. So anybody who's in the Midwest, Herb Kent is a legendary radio DJ. And again, what I love about this experience is the narratives that we get from our guests have nothing to do with the poem. And that doesn't matter. Why? Because we had a great conversation. But we are going to celebrate this poem, though. So Jamila Woods writes Ode to Herb Kent. It's a prose piece. Your voice crawls across the dashboard of Grandma's Dodge Dynasty on the way home from Lilydale First Baptist. You sing a cocktail of static and bass. You sound like you're dressed to the nines, cowboy hat, fur coat, and alligator boots. You sound like you lotion every tooth. You're a walking discography, Southside griot, keeper of crackle and dust in the grooves. You fell in love with a handmade box of wires at 16 and have been behind the booth ever since. From WBEZ to V103, you be the coolest gent, king of the dusties. Your voice wafts down from the ceiling at the hair lab. You supply the beat for Kim to tap her comb to. Her brown fingers paint my scalp with white grease to the tunes of Al and Barry and Luther. Your voice, an inside-out yawn, the sizzle of hot iron on fresh perm, the song inside the blackest seashell washed up on the south side in Bronzeville. You soundtrack the church picnic, the trunk party, Cynthia's 50th birthday bash, the car ride to school, choir, checkers. Your voice stretch across our eardrums like daddy asleep on the couch. Sound like grandma's sweet potato pie. Sound like mama's must have moved to. You showed us sound like grandma's sweet potato pie. Sound like the cigarette she hid in her purse for those rough days. You showed us what grandma's mamas must have moved to. When the West Side rioted the day MLK died, you were the audio salve to the burning city people. Your voice a soft sermon soothing the masses, speaking coolly to flames, spinning black records across the airwaves, spreading the gospel of soul in a time of fire. Joycetta said she bruised her thumbs, snapping to Marvin's Got to Give It Up, and I believe her. Thank you for joining me for Alignment. We'll see you again first Wednesday next month with two new Wisconsin guests, another line of poetry, and another amazing conversation. Hope you have an amazing month, and we will see you then. Thank you.